he talked about Barbados being very aquatic. I guess we should also look at the maritime sector back here. A close look at the details of the second quarter of 2022 GDP report suggests that maybe the maritime sector is underreported. That was observed from that analysis, and a whole lot of individuals, economists, and stakeholders have been complaining about that. In the second quarter GDP report, the maritime sector, mostly the water transport, was said to have contributed a mere 2.4 billion naira to the GDP out of 45.5 trillion naira for the quarter, and this contribution is just about 0.01% for the first quarter of 2022. So let's have this conversation this morning and see, well, from the eyes of the inward, we have Dr. Ikenna Nwosu joining us now to tell us if indeed their sector is being underreported. Good morning, Dr. Nwosu. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Nini. Thank you.
Yeah. So you guys are complaining that you're underreported in the second quarter of the GDP is 0.01% for the first quarter,
Yeah.
and now you say you're underreported. Do you align with that perspective?
No, we don't.
Okay. Absolutely,
we don't. In fact, it says quarter one was 0.00, quarter two was 0.01. So how could it have contributed something to the first quarter of the year? In any case, the language was clear. Water transportation. Transportation. So the MBS has to tell us what is the basis for using the word water transportation, because water transportation is not the entire maritime sector. The maritime sector is a very complex ecosystem that has so many value chains. So where you want to start from? If you're talking about water transportation, is he talking about the ferries that move people from Marina to within Lagos, interstate, intrastate? Is he talking about cabotage within the country?
Do we have interstates?
Yes.
Water transportation.
Some people paddle with canoes from one state to the other. Particularly
which other states?
Kogi states.
Oh, okay.
Kogi to Kwara, in those areas, yes.
Okay.
Because we have about 4,000 kilometers of inland waterways.
Yes.
850 kilometers of shoreline. This country is, 200 nautical miles of exclusive economic zone. It's a maritime paradise. So when you look at the ecosystem of the maritime sector, that calculation of MBS is wrong because it says water transportation. The irony is that I took my time to go through Nigeria's development plans. That language is the language used in all the development plans, including the National Development Plan.
The water transportation, is that what you're referring to?
Or maritime transportation.
Okay. But it's more than transportation.
That is wrong. It's a maritime industry ecosystem. So the National Development Plan has that. The ERGP has that. The Nigerian Economic Sustainability Plan does not even mention
But what have you people done? Because the NBS might be struggling with lack of data, which we know is a major challenge in Nigeria.
That's
correct.
The
issue of data.
The issue of data, what they have to do first is to map the ecosystem. So we understand what you mean by maritime sector. So many value chains. Is it the container ships? Is it the large tankers that bring in, that export crude oil? Is it the large...
There's the warehousing also?
Is it the warehousing? Is it the road transportation?
Haulage.
All the vessels, all the offshore vessels, the FPSOs, the oil rigs, all of them are under maritime because they're regarded as vessels. You come down to the clearing and forwarding services, you come down to the dock workers, the stevedoras, the dock workers, the seafarers, you come into cabotage, you come into on the commercial shipping side, you look at the vessels that bring in break bulk, the vessels that bring in containers, you look at the vessels that do dredging. It's a whole ecosystem. So
where's the missing link now?
The missing link here is that the National Bureau of Statistics at the lower end and the federal government at the top end has never, in all their development plans and in their development planning, created a niche for the maritime sector. And outside the oil sector, the maritime sector is the second largest revenue earner for this country.
Is it the maritime or agric?
Maritime, and I'll tell you why. Forget what the statistics say. We are in the system. When you look at a lot of the revenues that are ascribed to some of the other sectors, particularly the oil sector, they are actually maritime sector revenues. Take an example. The Guardian newspaper reported in February this year that between July 2019 and August 2021, the total freight paid on 41 billion liters of petroleum products imported to this country was 861 billion, which is more than the budget of all the 36 states of this country, excluding Lagos, for 2022. So how can you tell me that is freight only on imported products? I'm not imported petroleum products for those 2 years. I'm not talking about freight on other cargo brought into this country, other cargo sent out, commercial cargo. I'm not talking about the offshore oil vessels. I'm not talking about the breakbulk vessels. The ecosystem is so large.
Could it be that the sector is more informal than formal, which that is why they are not captured?
No, that is not the correct thing.
Okay.
The correct thing is that the government has not identified the maritime industry as it should be, as a complete ecosystem. They keep calling it maritime transport. There's a lot of value chain development in the maritime sector that is not transportation.
So what should we do now?
Good. Map the sector. The ecosystem should have its different value chains mapped out. The federal government should create a separate ministry for maritime. If you have a separate ministry for petroleum, your largest revenue earner, you have a separate ministry for agriculture, major contributor to GDP. You have for trade and investment, manufacturing. Aviation doesn't even add up to half of what maritime contributes to this country if you do the proper mapping, yet it has a ministry by itself. Many key countries in India, it's called the Ministry of Ports, Shipping, and Waterways. Pakistan, Portugal call it Ministry of Maritime Affairs. So because of the language government uses, Ministry of, they call it water transportation, it's put under the Ministry of Transport. So if you look at the National Development Plan today, the maritime sector was put under transport, and it has a section called maritime transport. And that is wrong. Since independence, this country does not have a national transport policy.
So can we start the lobbying? Are you doing the lobbying?
Because
yes, that's the way to go.
It's happening. And then they are planning a national maritime transport policy. You see again the wrong term? It should be national maritime policy or maritime industry policy, not maritime transport. So that language is what the National Bureau of Statistics will pick out: water transport, maritime transport, and circumscribe the sphere of the sector. How can you tell me that 2.4 billion only was contributed in Q2? Last year, the DG of NIMASA reported that NIMASA contributed to the consolidated revenue account 37 billion for the whole of last year. MPA has exceeded its own revenue targets. The DG of NIMASA said last year that this sector, maritime sector, could generate more than 75% of what oil sector earns, which is about $39 billion a year. So how can you tell me that in Q2 alone, we did 2.4 billion naira? Absolutely wrong. Absolutely. So the NBS needs to go back, sit with the federal government, the Nigerian Economic Management Team, get back to the Ministry of Transport, the presidency, the SGS office. They need to map the sector. They need to create a separate ministry for it to give it what it should be, Maritime Affairs Ministry. And based on that, collect the data from all the sector players. And then you have the correct information. Noting also, all the data that is pushed and revenue pushed to oil sector has to be removed from oil sector and put back to maritime, because the maritime sector is the key enabler for oil and gas sector.
Yeah, but I believe it is members of the industry like yourself,
yes,
who has the responsibility to push for this. Because if you just wait and say the NBS should do that, it may not happen. So as a stakeholder, I mean, your association and some other association, the LCCI and all that, if you come together with a voice and present your matter and do the lobbying, you know, which obviously is a necessity,
yeah,
then
right.
I believe you will get that. But thank you so much, Dr. Nwosu, for sharing your time with us. And we do wish you the best in your lobbying. Ours here is to report. So we'll be here again. Once you get the change, we'll bring you back again. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Okay.
All right. So talking about on the reporting, but after that, we'll take a break. And when we come back from that break, commodities market update is next. So stay with us. This is Business Morning on Channels Television.